Ever wonder what it'd be like if, the government just wasn't constantly looking over your shoulder?
Like, no rules, no taxes, just pure freedom.
Well, kind of. Today we're going deep on some books that really shake up how we think about government.
Oh yeah, these authors are not holding back.
They're diving into critiques of the state itself, questioning whether we even need leaders, and some even get into this really interesting concept called anarcho-capitalism.
Definitely some thought-provoking stuff here.
So get ready to maybe have your mind blown a little bit.
Totally. You might start questioning everything you thought you knew.
All right, so let's jump in. I think the first thing that really struck me reading through these books was this consistent theme of, governments just can't resist grabbing for more and more power.
Yeah, like that whole power corrupts thing. It's everywhere in these works.
Right. It's like this inherent tendency towards control.
Exactly. And Hayek, in The Road to Serfdom, he really lays out this chilling scenario. He's like, those little steps towards more government control, they can lead us straight to totalitarianism.
Totalitarianism? Wow, that's a scary thought.
It is, and it's easy to see how it happens. Think about it. What starts with regulating businesses could end with the government telling you what job you can have.
Or what you're allowed to say and think.
Exactly. So Hayek is basically sending up a huge warning flare.
And Rothbard doesn't exactly paint a prettier picture in Anatomy of the State, does he?
Oh no, he goes even harder. He calls the state a parasite, basically saying it exists to bleed its citizens dry.
That's a pretty brutal assessment.
It is, but it does make you think. Especially when you look at what Knox says in Our Enemy, the State.
Oh yeah, what was his take?
Well, Knox argues that governments are basically just tools for the elite.
So they don't actually serve the people.
Not really, according to him. It's all about soothing those in power, maintaining their control.
Huh. Okay, so even if we say, all right, some kind of government is necessary, can we really trust politicians to get it right?
Now that's the million-dollar question.
Right. Because a lot of these sources are pretty skeptical about, politicians' competence and even their intentions.
Totally. Hazlitt in Economics in One Lesson points out how politicians often just focus on quick wins.
Short-term gains for their own careers.
Exactly, even if it means screwing things up in the long run.
Like they just want to get reelected and don't really care what happens after that.
Pretty much. And then you've got Kaplan in The Myth of the Rational Voter arguing that both voters and politicians are often totally irrational.
Driven by, biases and flawed beliefs.
Yeah, he basically says that leads to some really dumb policy decisions.
So is he saying democracy is just inherently broken?
He doesn't come right out and say it, but he definitely raises some serious questions about how effective it can really be.
Okay, so if these guys are right, and governments tend to overreach, and politicians can't be trusted, where does that leave us? Is there another way?
That's where this wild idea of anarcho-capitalism comes in.
I'm definitely intrigued, but a world without ANY government, how would that even function?
Well, it's a pretty radical concept, but authors like Rothbard and the Tannehills, they really try to map it out.
Okay, lay it on me.
So imagine a society built entirely on private property and free markets.
Okay, so no taxes.
Nope, just voluntary agreements and transactions.
So how would we, pay for roads and schools and stuff?
That's where it gets interesting. Rothbard, in For a New Liberty, he believes that all those things we usually think of as government functions could actually be handled by the free market.
So private companies would build the roads and stuff?
Exactly, and they would compete to provide the best services just like any other business.
So instead of the DMV, we'd have competing companies offering driver's licenses.
Something like that. And the Tannehills, in The Market for Liberty, they make a similar argument. They really believe that free markets are the answer.
Okay, what about things like the police and the courts? Who would handle all that in an anarcho-capitalist world?
That's where Murphy comes in. He's got this book called Chaos Theory, where he dives into some pretty wild thought experiments about how security and justice would work without a state.
So no more cops. Just private security guards everywhere.
Yeah, it'd be more like private security companies competing to keep people safe. Murphy thinks they'd be way more efficient and accountable than a government-run police force.
So you basically be paying for your own personal protection like you pay for Netflix.
It's an interesting idea, right? And then you've got Friedman in The Machinery of Freedom arguing that education and healthcare would actually be better off without government interference.
So totally privatized healthcare and education.
Yep. He thinks it would lead to more innovation and lower costs.
Wow, so these authors are really reimagining everything.
Absolutely. And then you have Spooner, who takes things even further in No Treason. He argues that governments have zero legitimate authority over individuals.
Zero. Like none at all.
None. He believes we're only obligated to follow laws that we've explicitly consented to.
Wow. I mean, this whole deep dive has been mind-blowing.
I know, right? It really makes you think about the role of government in a whole new way.
Definitely. And I think what's really cool is that even though all these authors are skeptical of government, they approach it from so many different angles.
Yeah, there's not just one answer, which makes the whole conversation even more interesting.
Totally. So if we take a step back from all the theory and arguments, what's the big takeaway for us?
This deep dive has explored potential problems with government and offered an alternative vision, but it also leaves us with a big question. Is a completely stateless society actually possible?
Yeah, is anarcho-capitalism just a cool thought experiment, or could it actually work?
And if it could work, would we even want it to? What are the risks? What are the potential benefits? Lots to think about.
Definitely. And I think that's what these books do best. They challenge us to really examine our assumptions about how society should function.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe one of these radical ideas could actually lead to a better future.
Something to ponder for sure.
Keep those brain juices flowing.
All right, that's a wrap for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Until next time.